Have you ever felt like you're on the precipice of understanding something truly profound about yourself, yet it remains just out of reach? That's where Jeffrey Brunk comes in, a shamanic healer, Usui Reiki master, and spiritual counselor who will share his wisdom and understanding of the delicate balance of light and shadow. Explore the unseen realms with Jeffrey as your guide, one who has traversed these paths, facing his own wounds to emerge as an everyday shaman. Jeffrey's journey through shamanic practice, shadow work, and energy healing unveils the intricate ways in which these forces shape our physical, spiritual, and emotional well-being. Whether you're taking the initial steps towards inner betterment or you're further along on your path, there is something within this podcast that will resonate with you. Delve into the essence of what it means to navigate life's challenges with an everyday shaman's insight and discover the joy and purpose that can be found even in chaos. Join the Everyday Shaman in an extraordinary journey in which we will explore topics that could very well change the way you perceive the dance of light and shadow in your life and the world around you. A journey to greater self-awareness and the unseen world around us. Welcome to the Everyday Shaman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Everyday Shaman. I'm your host, Jeffrey Brunk, and I'm very pleased today to have a very special guest with me. Her name's Valerie Holbert. Valerie is an intuitive energy healer, a Reiki master, RYT 500, health and wellness coach, and inner presence coach. Like many other healers, her deepest traumas and wounds led to her discovering her gifts and calling as a healer. She believes we are living in a time where the call to move through old patterns and reconnect to ourselves, to each other, and the planet is getting stronger, louder, and more intense, now so more than ever. We need trusted guides, sacred spaces, and community to support our transformation as individuals and as a collective. Valerie believes transforming our struggles and our strengths is where we all have opportunity to find inner healing and expansion and extend that healing to the world around us. Her experiences have led her to knowing that our internal world is directly connected to the world around us. Valerie says it may feel selfish to do deep inner work when it seems the world is on fire, but it's actually the medicine. It's easy to feel stuck, sad, angry, overwhelmed, constricted, and even afraid. For many of us, we're finding we are no longer willing or able to stay stuck in that place, and the old ways aren't working anymore. In Valerie's own journey, as well as in work with her clients, she's found that integrating multiple modalities like intuitive energy healing, breath work, guided meditation, movement, parts work, and other mind-body practices provide the safety and space to cultivate extraordinary growth, healing, and spiritual connection. When she's not with clients, you'll likely find her thrifting, kayaking on a local river, ocean, or lake, snuggling with her crazy dogs and family, staring at the moon and clouds, or planning her next adventure. So welcome, Valerie. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Looking at your background, it seems like, we have a whole lot in common. And
we do.
For those that don't know, Valerie and I worked together, what was it, more than 20 years ago?
Yeah, in the 90s, right? Late 90s?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
yeah.
Both of us at that time, at least for myself, I know we didn't know that we would end up doing what we're doing now.
No, definitely not.
Working in the graphic arts field for a national baseball publication.
Mm-hmm.
It's a far cry from energy healing. So what led you, or what happened in your life to kind of flip the switch, so to speak, and to take you down this road of wanting to better yourself and help others?
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, I wouldn't have thought back in those days that I would be doing the type of healing I am now, but I was always torn between art and healing, but in a more traditional sense. Like I thought maybe I wanted to be a physical therapist or do art therapy or even massage therapy. So it was always like torn between the two worlds. But my experience initially, it was around health crisis. So I, in my early 20s, had a fibromyalgia diagnosis that stemmed from a laundry list of symptoms. I had vertigo, I had pretty much chronic pain. Some of that stuff when we were working together, I didn't really share it a lot with people. And traditional medicine basically said, we don't know what's wrong with you. Here's a prescription for antidepressants or pain medicine.
Yeah.
And those things didn't help.
That seems to be the go-to.
Yes, even now for a lot of people, really. And, like we said, this was late 90s in the Triangle area of North Carolina. And so I began to seek out alternative healing methods. I found yoga. This was in a church basement. This was before yoga studios were around, especially in the South. I started seeing like naturopaths and other types of healers, massage, and even some energy workers and, things that for the time were pretty out there.
Well, did you find that when you were going to energy healers, and I know yoga can be very beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
I tried yoga as well, and I don't have the body for it. I'm too compact to really bend over that way.
Right.
I can do the sunrise easily, but when
Right.
it comes to bending and touching my toes, that was different.
Yeah.
But did you find that it made a difference doing alternative methods or going to alternative healers?
Yeah, it did. Even back then, it was a beginning for me. And I'll fast forward a little bit to say that what I was beginning to find in that journey and that I found later as a healer was that for me, those symptoms were showing up because of trauma in my life, some childhood trauma that some of which I was just starting to remember and things that I had been through. And, we hold that in our bodies, like the body keeps the score, the issues in the tissues, these sort of things. And that was showing up for me in these physical ways. And so, yes, I was beginning to find some relief in those and some moments of relief. And also, all of those things are designed from a physical perspective to help us become more comfortable in our bodies, also an energetic perspective. So it was helping, but it was, it was a slow process. I didn't have like an instant moment in that particular awakening. I had more of that with some later things, but it was,
It's
a beginning.
I like the issues in the tissues saying
Yeah.
I gravitate towards dis-ease causing disease and
Yes.
stress causing ulcers comparison.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people stuff those things down, whether it's childhood traumas or any type of traumas.
Right.
They tend to hold on to them, and that will manifest in many ways, both emotionally and physically.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's feeling sorry for oneself or anger, something happening to them that's causing them not to be able to function correctly. Now, with fibromyalgia, I also had a bit of an experience, not personally with fibromyalgia, but during my upheaval, dark night of the soul, shaman sickness, whatever you want to call it, boot up the butt. I was going to court-ordered therapy. And did this for 10 years. And it got to the point where my therapist and I, it was more of a friendship visit for an hour once a month.
Yeah.
But at one point, one of her colleagues came into our meeting, into her office, and asked me, she said, I have a young girl that I've been working with, and she has fibromyalgia. Doctors can't find a cure or can't find a reason why she has it. Is there anything you can do? And at that point, I think at my level 3 in my Reiki training. And I found it it blew my mind that I'm in with a psychologist who's coming to ask for my help. But there's a lot of, say, autoimmune disorders as well that doctors can't explain. And the go-to for not necessarily the psychologist, but the psychiatrist is to prescribe a medication. And that just further dulls that inner voice or the ability to let things go that people have stuffed down inside. If you don't mind me asking, what type of traumas were they that you know of that could have started causing some of these issues for you?
Yeah, I don't mind sharing. I'll say quickly that in terms of fibromyalgia, and autoimmune conditions, we know now, like science shows that something like 80% of people with fibromyalgia autoimmune conditions would score high on a adverse childhood experiences test or ACE test. It's much higher in women. but so science is starting to support kind of what, we've experienced and know intuitively about that connection. So for me, when I was almost 3, my dad died in a gun accident, and I actually witnessed it happen. And so, that in of itself was a traumatic experience. And part of the time after that was, spending a lot of time with extended family, including an uncle that I stayed with that wasn't safe. And there was some abuse from that uncle that continued on and off for several years. And all of those things, because of how young I was, I internalized. And it wasn't really until, of course, the part with my dad, we talked about, but I also got some messages from adults like it wasn't okay to talk about that because it was upsetting to some adults, not to my mom, but other people around. And when I was 19, which interestingly was kind of around the time I started having these physical experiences, it came out from another relative had made some accusations against this uncle. And like all of a sudden, memories and things started making sense to me that, you hear these kind of stories and you think, well, how can someone not know? How can they not remember or like know that they had these traumatic experiences? Well, our mind and our parts want to protect us, right? And we also contextualize these things as children. But so I started remembering things and realizing that I had been abused by this relative as well. But it took me some time to, have conversations like with my mom about it or with other people. And I even had a friend recently that I shared about, and she was like, I didn't know that you had this experience, So I think oftentimes, like, we might not know on a conscious level, even initially. Sometimes we might be really super aware of what it is. But so for me, it was largely around those things. And I had a lot of figuring out to do, and I'd done a lot of disassociation over the years, right? So as a way of coping. And really, I found out later, like I thought, sometimes it comes in waves. Like I thought I'd like done the work. And then in my 40s, then it was like, oh, well, here's another layer for you with some other things.
Yeah, that's sort of the way it goes. You think you're on one path that you're meant to be on, and all of a sudden it can come out of the blue that, oh, this is not where I'm meant to be, and you're taken in another direction. And if you listen and you go in that direction but listening is a hard part. Also, letting go or being able to have someone to tell these things to is extremely important. I've personally worked with so many people that did not. And again, you and I have discussed, and I've discussed before, and men are the toughest ones to work with because they don't want to admit things. And traditional therapy, I don't believe, is the most advantageous way for someone to go because you can still pick and choose what you choose, what you want to share, and not really the things that are darker and deeper that you know about. You don't want to put them out there for fear of men, especially appearing weak or appearing as be a victim. And I'm just curious, when did you ever reach a point where it was like, I need to work on myself? And how did you do that? Because I think so many people need to know how to address these things with themselves. Or did you go the traditional route of just being given, oh, well, you're depressed or because these types of traumas, like you're discussing, they're dark, they're difficult things to get over. And they weren't repressed, because you remembered them even from that early age, right?
Yeah.
How did you go about addressing those things on a personal level, discussing them to get to where you would be able to help others in similar circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is kind of a both and of what you were asking about doing it for myself versus a, traditional way, because in one of your earlier podcasts, you were sharing, the piece of how oftentimes, probably especially for our generation, that we're expected to do things a certain way, right? You're kind of expected, make good grades, you go to a good college, you get a good job, a traditional type of job. And so while I did very early on, do some pretty unconventional things that I took initiative on myself because the traditional medical system wasn't helping at all, I also still, parts of me felt like I had to stay within that traditional framework. You know, I could only go so far out of it, both in my career or even in the healing methods I was choosing for myself. Although some of them, like I said, to a lot of people were pretty out there. So I was sort of slowly like, I moved from graphic design to yoga, right? So at a time where yoga was becoming more accepted and kind of focusing on trauma informed yoga and how psychology overlaps with that, and yoga therapy. That was like the program I did. And then I did a health coaching training that was holistic, where I could, go down that more traditional avenue of like diet and movement, but bring in these other pieces of what health means. And then I brought in the energy training part.
So when you were doing yoga and movement exercises,
Mm-hmm.
it's a way of quieting your mind,
Mm-hmm.
which is extremely important, but it also puts you in a flow. And this is going to sound crazy to listeners and deep,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a flow of a form of physics.
Mm-hmm.
You're being one with, say, the wind, or you're one with yourself, but also in flow with everything around you. It's a connection. So I've learned, and I'm sure you have too, that when you begin this journey into becoming a healer or becoming yourself, and I think anyone can be a healer.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say that lightly. I think anyone has within them, not necessarily an energy healer, but if they are at a place where they are their authentic selves, they're able to help others. So when you're doing these things in the beginning, it's like taking steps to getting to different levels. There's different tiers. With me, I found that it seemed funny at the time. Well, actually, it didn't seem funny, but everyone was coming to me. Can you tell me what my spirit animal is? And it started with that type thing. And now being to a point where I'm working with so much dark trauma within people, abuse and suicide attempts and just all kinds of things. And it's going from, hey, here's a cute little animal to working with darkness and things. And I found that it was like taking baby steps, and then you reach a point and there's a break and nothing happens. And I've learned that it was a time for me to both rest and be ready for what comes next, and the next download, which is going to be more intense.
Right.
Not necessarily going from 0 to 60, but 0 to 20. And
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, initially I was drawn to yoga because I had this moment in a yoga class where I was aware it was the first time I had not been in physical pain, and I didn't know how long. And this was in my 20s, like you're not supposed to be having pain in your entire body all the time when you're 24 years old or whatever, And so I was like, wow, it just gave me a lot of hope that if I can have a moment, a minute without pain, then I can have more than that. And, as I continued with yoga and, my training as a teacher, unfortunately, I think a lot of yoga culture focuses on the asana, the movement and the practice and, getting into a certain pose. But, the other parts of yoga, there's a lot of other parts to yoga, are about like being comfortable in our body, right? Like creating internal space. And for people who have been through trauma, that's what autoimmune conditions are. We're fighting our own body. So it can be scary to be in our own body. So I think that for me, especially looking back, that's why I was so drawn to yoga. It was like these baby steps, like you said, to being able to be in our body, because oftentimes not pain has a message, right? And it's just going to get louder if we don't get still and quiet and really take a look at it. And it can be dark and painful, but
so you have to take a step too in recognizing that you have to let go of things, which can be frightening. Because it can lead to change. And I found change for anyone can be a frightening thing, whether it's changing a job or moving to a new town or having a child or whatever it may be. So did you feel as you moved along and became more cognizant of what was causing the pain and the thing, was it frightening for you to let go of certain things and move ahead? Because I think that's what really holds people back, a lot of people back from taking those steps to better themselves. Because fear is a great motivator in a way that it's a negative motivator.
Right.
It's a motivator in keeping you where you are.
Yeah, I think fear definitely was a factor that held me back or maybe slowed me down because I still just feeling like I had to stay within these traditional ish, roles. And, and being married and being a parent and being someone who was doing a lot of care for others and not realizing I wasn't doing that for myself. And it really took a second, more like impactful dark night of the soul experience when I was already kind of in the world of yoga and coaching and just pretty early on in my energy healing experience to really like if we're not getting the message when it's gentle, we're going to get it more intense. And, it really took that to like knock me on my, what, and just really be forced into like the next level.
Yeah. So when that happens, because it's not that a dark night of the soul or shaman sickness, it's not a one-time thing.
Right.
And life still goes on, even for healers. And when we don't listen, we're caught up in the throes of life and everything it throws at you, and you don't hear it. It's not necessarily refusing to hear it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Early on, it's sort of, for me, it was refusing to hear it because of the fear. And you refuse it long enough, you do get the boot up the butt, and it is more intense. So you got to that point. Did you get to a point where you got it like, it's like, if you're not going to listen, here's the slap. And
yeah, I did. I mean, and I can share what that one was or be more general about it. I don't know what's more helpful in the
however
context.
as much as you want to share or feel comfortable sharing, it's up to you.
Yeah. I mean, I'll share it because it's something that I thought about sharing for a while. And before I was actually separated and on the way to divorce, I had reasons to kind of not share it so much. But so my partner at the time and I were looking for some support in our marriage and not really resonating with traditional therapy. And so we found someone who was a coach and had presented themselves as being like trauma informed and spoke this really like spiritual language and these things that just sounded like things that I resonated with. Short version is that this person who was a woman and my husband at the time developed what started as an emotional affair and then turned into more than that. And like my partner at the time lied to me, this woman lied to me, this was a healer in our community. So it was months before I found out, and she posted on her social media, and
healer in name only.
Right. Yeah. And it was just, so there was like this triangulation of like, there was a betrayal with my partner. There was a betrayal with her. I had all this fear in our community where we had overlapping spiritual groups. I felt like I couldn't speak out, but I wanted justice. And later my partner and I did reconcile and try to work things out and then separated again a year ago. But when that all happened, when that hit the fan, I was just devastated. I never thought that could happen in my marriage. I had a lot of shame because like I had found this woman. I was the one that took us there. It was truly that dark night of the soul where like, you have these moments where you're just like in the grocery store crying, staring at the, whatever's in front of you. But it was also such a gift. I mean, I realized I was still I'd still been disassociating about so many things. And like when you're knocked down like that, you can't disassociate anymore. Like you're cracked open to the point that you have to rebuild yourself, and
so your issues, I mean, stemming from your childhood experiences and then this happening, trust was something you struggled with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something I believe that people that are more open and aware, they're so sensitive. But when it comes to family and those closest to us, that's where we're most vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because we don't expect it. Then it leads to, can I trust my friends? And then eventually, if people don't recognize it within themselves, that is a shadow element of themselves, it can lead down the rabbit holes of YouTube. And then all of a sudden the conspiracy theories, and you're living on the planet as a lizard person or lizard people are all around you. because you don't trust the government, you don't trust anyone. And I'm not saying you specifically. So yeah, those issues of trust, it's kind of like the disease thing or the stress causing ulcers. Issues of trust can also manifest themselves emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
but you would also repress these things. It takes people a while to recognize things, and sometimes it's days, and sometimes it's years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, after the body and the yoga exercises, and you
Mm-hmm.
still practice,
Yeah.
where did that lead you to? What was next?
So after that, I had started a program for the health coaching because there were things about changes in diet and stress management and that sort of thing that were helpful for me at the time. And I wanted my work to help other people. And we touched on this before, but oftentimes for people who are experiencing these autoimmune conditions and sort of mystery symptoms, they don't get help from the traditional medical system and feel very, not heard or seen, or sometimes even told it's all in their head. And, so I wanted to be able to support people moving through that. And I had always been curious about energy healing and Reiki, and found someone to do like a one-on-one training with for my Reiki over an extended period of time.
Hmm. How long was the period of time?
Um, for that Reiki one was probably maybe 6 to 8 months, and then another 6 to 8 months for Reiki two. So a couple of years for one and two with this one person. She'd stopped doing classes and was doing it one-on-one. And then I had like another year before I went and did Reiki three,
So you
which I
took
think is
time.
important.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
totally agree with you. It took 4 years for me,
Mm-hmm.
not because I didn't get it. It's just took taking time between the different levels to both
Mm-hmm.
on myself. And it's funny because last night my wife was on Facebook and saw one of those ads, become a Reiki master online and
Right over the
a
weekend.
month or
Yeah.
oh, those things just really rip me. And she put a post on there, and I was so proud of her for doing this.
Mhm.
About she kind of ripped them, but she does it in a nice way. About you can't learn Reiki online. You can't become a
Mhm.
Reiki master in a month or 2 months because they're money making things. And
Mhm.
I've run into Reiki masters or Reiki practitioners in the past that look at it as just a business. They don't approach it with a sense of actually wanting to provide betterment to people. It's
Mhm.
it's a way to have a business and make money. And I've been turned back. I was once turned away from a Reiki master. And she said, I'm sorry, I'm not taking new customers, new clients. And I'm like, how do you turn
Mhm.
people away?
Mhm.
And so to hear that you took the time to actually take these things in and make them part of who you are and use them properly, that also gave you time to, I guess, further discover where you're to go next.
Yeah, and I think that piece is so important because I know a lot for some people, Reiki is a tool that they use for themselves, and it might not be a part of their work. And for me, that second wave of the dark night of the soul came kind of in the early stage of that, after I'd started it, but pretty early on. And that was also a powerful part of really opening me up. I learned quite a few things during that time, including that I was not a good receiver. I wanted to help other people, but I was terrible at letting other people help me, and realizing how important that is, how vital that is, that couldn't really be fully present for other people, if I wasn't letting other people do that for me and doing it for myself. And I think that's part of the reason why that the timing was like that for me, because then when I started doing practicing Reiki on others, it was just like all of these things started coming through and happening in ways that were, well, I mean, I guess to my like thinking mind, unexpected, but also parts of me always knew and had experiences with.
Hmm.
Um, but back to the timepiece, I personally think it is really valuable. And my teacher said, like, there were certain things that we had to do before she was even willing to move on to the next level, a certain number of days on a personal practice, a certain amount of time doing this, a certain number of distance sessions on other people. And like,
Now, when you have worked with others, do you find that the ones that may have more traumatic things in their lives
mm-hmm.
are more open? And have you seen within anyone that you've worked with, seen them go on to also help people?
Have I seen others go on? I guess I'm having trouble thinking of a specific example of that, but I think that's very common, because for people who have been through those kinds of experiences intensely, I think there is a real desire to help other people, that we know and see are struggling.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
for me, from a very young age, I always knew I wanted to help people,
Right.
but I didn't know how I was supposed to or what I was supposed to do. So I think that kind of led in a way to having 6-page resume worth of jobs and looking for where I was supposed to be. And then probably an 8-page resume that would include all of my religious searching. And I can name a couple of specific examples, but of people that I'll use Dan as an example.
Right.
He didn't go through. I mean, he's had his traumas in his life, but he didn't get the boot up to Keister. He came fairly quickly through. But I've also seen people that did go through things that they were in a hole that seemed to them impossible to climb out of. And now they're doing very well. And others that really weren't in a hole that I worked with, but they didn't do anything to help better themselves. And now they just, they'll be better for a little while and go back to the same place because it's not like taking penicillin for an infection when you receive any type of healing. It's a two-way street and you have to do things for yourself. So it makes it frustrating for us because we know what's happening and we know what can happen, but we can't do anything to help the person change their mind or to see things until it's time for them to see it, whether it's in a good, peaceful transition type way or like it was for us with the slap across the face from the divine that's they're going to listen, especially if you're meant to be. And I think we're all meant to help others.
Right.
But I think some of us are meant to help others in a greater way, and not individually, but collectively as well.
Right.
Which leads me to something, and I'm just going to read this. This was in things you sent, because I want you to explain this because I'm not exactly sure
Okay. I hope I can.
You wrote, one of the downloads that I've gotten and also come up in sessions as a client around sacred reciprocity with Pachamama and how she wants us to release to her for composting and to clear heavy energies. I think a lot of us feel guilty about that because of what humans have done to the earth, and that actually disconnects us even more. So what exactly are you saying there? Maybe I focus too much on the word composting, so I don't know.
Well, I'll see if I can explain myself. So yeah, well, it's come up in quite a few different ways over the last few years, repeatedly. And for me, when things come up repeatedly, I'm definitely like, okay, like I'm paying attention to that. And it has shown up both for myself and hearing other people say things. So I have a friend who's a shaman that I see regularly. I still see other healers as an important part of what I'm doing for myself to show up for other people. And a lot of the sessions that we've done have been where we're calling in the spirit of the earth, Pachamama, to help release and clear heavy energy or hucha, right? And, and part of the sacred reciprocity in those sessions is, giving thanks and breath back. And then, but outside of sessions, I find myself running into a lot of people, especially healers or people who are really conscious about the earth and wanting to treat the earth better, but they have so much guilt that it's like, instead of wanting to interact with the earth in a way of ritual or feeling okay about giving to the earth, they feel guilty about that because of the damage we've done as humans to the earth. And it's actually blocking them from being able to connect to the earth, right? Like it's Mother Earth. Like she wants to nurture us and she wants to take what's no longer serving us and, release it into the earth. That's what I mean by the composting, right? Like I've even had some guided meditations where it's like, visualize that what you're releasing going to the earth and things growing up from that. So I think this like guilt and shame around, like humans have destroyed the planet, which in a lot of ways we have, right? But like that doesn't mean that we can't still interact with the earth and with Pachamama in these ways that are still reciprocal.
Yeah. And we have to. I mean, I think it's
right.
The earth is healing and the earth is going to be here long after humankind is gone. It's regenerated itself many times. Giving back to the earth. I do a thing here. We live way down in the woods and I like taking night walks. And whether it's during those walks or it's during times that I'm outside during the day, I thank the earth for what it's given us and for allowing us to be here.
Right.
And I also apologize for what we have done with intention. I think everything's important to do with intention.
Right.
And I have also gone around not just the 10 acres we're on, but the 10 empty acres beside us. I tend to incorporate for some reason, and it's not that I studied it, but Native American or indigenous traditions and methods. And so I'll give offerings and blessings to the land, but also ask for not forgiveness, but I apologize for people have done in the past, what people have done currently or what they're doing currently, what we're not aware. People are not aware of the connectedness of, say, an example so much as like a dead tree falling and how it feeds life in other ways. The tree may be dead, but it's feeding the soil, which is feeding insects within the soil, which is then feeding the birds. And it comes around in such a big circle, and people aren't aware of how nature takes care of itself, but it also takes care of us.
Right.
We've gotten away from those traditional, really ancient ways of thinking that we call them ancient ways, but they're the right ways.
Right.
Because everything is given to us now and everything, order something from Amazon. You got it the next day. You want information. It keeps us even from getting outdoors and appreciating the earth or appreciating the beauty of a single bloom on a flower or the sound of a bee. The small things that can help us awaken to other things within us that we need to address.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. And it goes back to that kind of both and piece that it is important to go out into nature and to apologize and to do things that we do have control over in terms of how we're treating the earth. And it's also important to receive from the earth in the ways of releasing, but also just receiving the beauty. I was just running into so many people that were like, the guilt of that was keeping them from being able to connect with the earth. And interestingly, it's kind of a parallel to what I was saying before about receiving, like being able to receive from other people in order to more fully give. So yeah, I just think that it's important to not let that sort of guilt or fear or like the world's on fire and the earth is mad at us or mad at me to be in the way of finding the ways to connect, with nature. And
yeah, I don't believe the earth is mad at us. I believe the earth is reacting to our own actions that we, aware or not aware, whether we're aware of them or not, have affected it. It's not that it's purposely going to come back and bite us on purpose.
Right.
We're creating that for ourselves.
Right. And so if we change what we're creating, right, that's where that internal work comes in. Like it's just also connected. So I don't know if that makes it any clearer or not, but I think that's kind of where that was coming from. And it's that, as above, so below, as within, without, quote that a lot of us have heard. And I think it's
a divine connection, say like the yin and the yang. There's a balance between the two, divine and the earth and everything outside of it, which is more vast than just our universe or just our galaxy. and everything being energy,
Mm-hmm.
our thoughts, our words, our actions, everything we do. I was very conscious when I was writing my memoir about every word that I wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a funny story about that with me is I remember staying up one night. It was 6 a.m. when I finished writing this chapter. And I had saved it on my hard drive. I'd saved it on a thumb drive. I'd saved it in the cloud. And
Mm-hmm.
I got up to go get something to drink and to go to the restroom. And I came back to work on it some more, and it was gone, not just from one
Oh,
place, all of them. And I'm like, okay, that was not meant to be in here. But
right.
I was very conscious of the words because even a keystroke
Mm-hmm.
and the words you put there's energy behind letters. And that
Right.
is something that has been for thousands of years. People have understood that the letters themselves, the way they're shaped,
Mm-hmm.
the way they were designed, they hold significant energetic properties to them.
Right.
I mean, it gets down to such a minute size, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter how small the intention or the action or the word is. It still has an effect. It has a ripple effect on everything.
Right.
Everything
And
around us in this realm, everything we can see, but also in the realms that, the unseen.
unseen. Yes.
And it's the unseen that really, that's where it ripples the most and
Mm-hmm.
affects us, like with the autoimmune disorders or the
Yeah.
dis-ease.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see these things, but we pick up on them.
Yeah.
So I'm curious when you work with people in your practice now,
Mm-hmm.
what is the way, how do you go about doing a session? I know it varies because I know it does for
Mm-hmm.
me from person
Yeah.
to person. So how do you
Mm-hmm.
go about your practice and working for a specific individual?
Yeah, it can vary a lot by person. And sometimes if I have the luxury of being able to see clients and I know we're going to have multiple sessions, we may do some sessions where we're doing more somatic tools or some parts work, and then another session that's more focused around energy work. But it's not always like that. And so if it's a one session, or we'll people will fill out a little intake, but I like to have a good amount of time before we start, moving into the energy healing part to check in, like what's most alive physically, spiritually, emotionally. I like to ask people if they have guides that they know of,
Mhm.
ancestors or other types of guides. And, just really talk a little bit before we move into the session. Now, that said, I also share with people, we might have an intention that we've created together of where things are going to go, and it might go somewhere totally different.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I do that too. And I do sort of the same thing because I
mhm,
have a phone or a video consultation with someone who contacts me.
yeah.
I've never had one that lasted under 2 hours.
Hmm.
It says on my website 1 hour. No, because I don't
Yeah.
have limitations on that. But
Yeah. Same.
when I work with someone and have an intention, it starts with that intention, but to what
Right.
it leads to, who knows? And I tell them,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
also let them know before I will do a shamanic journey, have no expectations. Because I can tell you,
Hmm.
if I had expectations of what I would encounter on the journey, I would be wrong 100% of the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so I've shared that piece as well. I also let people know, I've come to let people know, I'm still dabbling a little bit with what exactly to call what I do. And I use the word Reiki because I think it's more accessible for people.
Yeah.
It's a big reason. But the intuitive piece, I do let people know there may be things that come through spirit guides, ancestors, words, all kinds of different things. But I don't ever know what those are because that's not me. And so, I just want to like help set people's expectations with that. But we'll usually start with a guided meditation on the table. And then I also let people know, I may move around your body in sort of that traditional Reiki format, but more than likely we'll be called to a specific place and then kind of follow
Yeah. So it's
where
not
that goes.
prescribed like when you go through the classes,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
sort of like a step by step formula
Yeah.
that you're taught
Yeah. Which I think was helpful initially just as a
to learn.
structure.
Yeah.
But for me personally, that was just more of a gateway to opening up a lot of things for me. And I honor the practice and the history of it deeply, but how I use it, is more intertwined. And then after the session, if it's in person, we'll sit down afterwards. I'll let them, as they are ready to come back, and I'll share what came up. I don't usually share during the session because often people are having an experience, and if it's called to, I will share. And I'll share in person. We'll often draw a card. In distance sessions, now I'm curious, it sounds like you do mostly distance, but I was really surprised how powerfully things came through in distance sessions. Even for myself, there's something about not having the density of the physical body in front of me and in our space, since we're working out in the quantum field anyway, that, I don't want to say it's more powerful, but
it is more powerful. It is more powerful.
I guess.
And I say it this way, and it's not I don't mean it as a slam, but I tell people, I think Reiki's kind of like a Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
But shamanic journeying or doing it distance wise, I would prefer, because I've been on a cellular level within individuals being able to heal someone, no matter whether it's trauma or physical pain, it's down in the dirt,
Right.
instead of just temporarily. I think Reiki, in a way, for a lot of practitioners, and I probably get a lot of flack for this, is it's almost like a spa-like massage experience.
Right.
That doesn't last, but there are things you can do distance-wise that I'm aware of that can release people from certain things ancestrally.
Right. Yeah. Past lives.
And science has shown that traumas that happen to ancestors of ours hundreds of years ago, it changes DNA, and it continues to change DNA, and that's how it passes forward. And it can affect us physically in a lot of ways that we don't understand. And I'll use an example of, say, not being able to conceive or whatever it may. It's from something that possibly happened many years ago that traumatically changed someone, and it passed forward through a family line. And you can't see that during a hands-on session, because it's not. I have done hands-on sessions where it's almost the same as being in a trance-like state and leaving like it is during a distance session. But most of the time, you're aware of walking around the table. You're aware of,
right,
your eyes, where your hands are, or whatever the case may be. So you're not, it's 100% committed to that intention and that focus as yours in a distance.
Yeah, I think that is a good way of explaining that. And although I will say, I do have a lot of clients that come to me and afterwards they're like, wow, that's really different from my other Reiki experiences. Because like I said, I'm using that word because I'm still trying to figure out, like, how do we put a word to this exactly?
Oh,
but
yeah. I mean, gosh, I hate titles.
I know.
But I agree with what you said. It's like people are searching for someone to help, and they'll Google Reiki. Or
right.
I did not want the word shaman to be on my book. I told my editor, because I do not want the title. I mean, it's a very revered title, and the book is the Everyday Shaman and everything. I've had, but I did not want to use it, and I still don't. I don't call myself that, and I don't call myself a Reiki. I don't like titles because that's ego.
Yeah.
That's an ego thing. But at the same time, that's how people find you.
Right. So, yeah. So I'm still navigating that a little. And I call my sessions, I've been calling them like soul alchemy or soul alignment, and seeing kind of how those words land. But the ancestral piece that you mentioned and past lives, I did do some training with ancestral work that also really took things to another level, both personally and professionally. And a part of my session, usually at the end, is, naming, of course, inviting healthy and healed ancestors in the beginning, but naming that the work that we've done is for the true and highest good, and for healing of this person in all planes and in all directions, backwards and forwards. Because I think not only can we be affected by the the traumas of our ancestors, we're also affected by the gifts. So the burdens and the gifts of our ancestors and the work that we're doing now. Because like you said, it's not just this planet and this dimension, right? So like what we're doing, it is the healing work that we're doing, changing our frequency is healing in all directions, right? Like it's serving our future generations as well as backwards, as well as in all these other directions. And so I think that's that piece too that we touched on that in my bio about people oftentimes just feel like, oh, I can't, it's so selfish to spend money on this or to, work on self-care. But if we can reframe it a little, and science shows that, we see science now that supports this, right? Changes water composition and prayers that affect people.
Part of my thing was when I was probably close to the peak. Now, my wife's going to be a guest on the show at some point, and she's going to give her rendition of what I went through because a lot of it I don't remember. It was really traumatic. It was not pretty. But at one point, here's a guy who, myself, barely graduated from high school because I was never good in math. And I'd failed my geometry exam my senior year, and I had to pass it to graduate. But I worked so hard, so he passed me because I failed by 1 point. But at the peak of all of this that was happening with me, I gained an understanding of quantum mechanics and quantum physics. Now, it's not that I could stand at a board and write equations,
right?
But I understood how frequency and connection were. I saw the trees composed of numbers. It was just bizarre. I saw the days in colors. So I'd wake up and see a day, it would be a tint of red or green or blue or yellow. And I knew red was a day, it's like, be on guard. But I had that understanding, and I'd never studied that before. But the frequency and vibration are everything. For people to understand that even when you're around them, if they're having an off day, a bad day, they're angry, they're frustrated, and there's a lot of anger in the world now. Part of that, it transfers over. Even being aware of how you are, as a person and the people you're closest to, when you pick up with the ones you're closest to, you pick it up really quickly. It's like, what's wrong with you? And, what's going on? But it transfers over. It has that ripple effect. Part of what you're saying about the self-care, was it exactly the selfish part? It may seem selfish. I call one thing that's very important good selfishness, and that's taking yourself out of a situation, be it a social situation or a conversation, and just getting away from it. That doesn't mean just not speaking. Sometimes not speaking speaks more than words. Taking yourself out of a place, no matter what the other people think, it's part of self-care.
Right.
It's really best for yourself, because how can you help other people in any way if you're not taking care of yourself? And that's just one way to do it.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad you brought that piece up because it relates to boundaries, which was another big thing for me that I had to learn in some hard ways, that I realized that I probably couldn't have been fully able to move into energy work at earlier points in my life because I wasn't really boundaried enough, and to be able to move myself fully out of the way and distinguish. You're talking to Dan about the highly sensitive person, and I grew up that way. Like I call myself spongy or the canary in the coal mine. And, a lot of people like that, we have a hard time differentiating other people's energy and our own. So
like an empath.
I've called myself that before too. And so, but it was essential to be able to discern that before I could move into these other realms and be able to move my own self out of the way and discern.
A lot of times it's the people that have gone through some of the more difficult traumas. If they're like the ones you described earlier as a child, or anything that happens, physically, those are the people that seem to be able to have a gift for helping others the most, because they are able to relate to others in ways that most others can't.
Yeah. And it was a survival method for a lot of people, because if you, especially as a child, been through deep trauma like that, what we learn is that, I have to really understand what other people are experiencing and thinking in order to react in ways where I get get, taken care of, where I'm safe. And so I think part of that comes from having to be hyper aware of energies of other people, and so some nurture, some nature,
And
but,
that's
and
a
then
double-edged sword.
yeah,
My worst nightmare would be like to be in Times Square at New Year's Eve.
right.
So you want to sort of seclude yourself, but at the same time have to be out there.
Right.
And so when people are searching, they may not totally understand what's going on, but it's the strangest thing. And they just need someone to talk to.
Yeah.
Emanating from us is this acceptance.
Right. Yeah. And that's a real different way than I think most of us operate, even with the best intentions. And that comes from that internal work, right? Of like being comfortable with ourselves. That interesting that you say that. It's actually been a part of the inner presence training of these exercises where we have to sit in silence with our partner or sit in silence and, practice sessions. And it is so valuable because that space, it does allow for so much. And, so much of our pain and discomfort or anxiety comes when we don't feel like we have space or spaciousness, right? It's like constriction. And yeah, I think that's a real gift.
Like you were saying, the prescribed described it pretty closely as I say, you graduate from high school, you get you go to college, you hopefully get a good degree and a good job, and then you find the right person, and then the house, and then the kids, and then the cul-de-sac, and then you die.
Right.
So after we moved here, I was up at the top of the driveway, and I looked, and I'm like, oh my God, it's a cul-de-sac. So I came back and told my wife, I said, we've got to move. And he thought, oh no, he met a neighbor and he doesn't like them. And I said, no, it's a cul-de-sac. Following that path, a lot of people are still on that. The younger generation is not.
Right.
There's two good things about that. There are a lot of younger people that are a lot more aware. Most that I've encountered or worked with are in their early 20s, between 20 and 30, that are old souls and very aware. They are the ones, they're needed now, but they're going to be needed later as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. My daughter is 19 and she definitely came in that way. And listening to Dan's podcast that you guys did recently, she was highly sensitive, empathic child, and she's chosen not to go to, because she made great grades in high school. But she was just like, Mom, I need a break from school. Like, and the 4-year school is just not for me. And we fully supported her in that. But even in this day and age, there's a lot of people that they just assume she's going to college or that she's taking a gap year and will be going and doing those like right steps of things.
They don't know. Trades pay a lot better. And then you go to college and that's a whole lot of money a lot of times, but it's what's expected.
Right.
I was lucky to have parents like yourself that just said, you can do anything you want to do. And they gave me that freedom. And for a long time, I kind of resented how much freedom they gave me because I made a lot of mistakes.
Right.
But you can't grow without making mistakes and failing. So it's really good that you allow that with your daughter. I know my mom and dad later in life, I realized they struggled with a lot of that, but they knew they had to have that to grow. What is your daughter doing now?
Yeah, she's been working since she graduated a year ago. She's been working 2 jobs, and one of them is a barista, and, and she works with people that have gone to college and, and she's actually making good money. Like she just opened up her own money market account and she's working to build her credit. But she doesn't know what she wants to do. She's thought about so many different things. And so this was just her time to like experience that and ask those questions for herself in her own, she just moved into her own apartment with her boyfriend and her bestie and just finding herself.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing, is being okay with not knowing what you're supposed to do or what you want to do. Being allowed to try to have time to figure that out and find it on their own, whether it comes in their 20s or their 40s or 50s.
Right.
If you're not growing, then it's time to move on. At least keep looking.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I kept trying to, there were things I enjoyed about being a graphic designer because I did like the creative aspect of that, but I kept trying to be like, oh, well, maybe if I'm a graphic designer for a nonprofit, like in that way, I'm because that call to help was always there. And so I kept putting it into the traditional accepted ways of doing things. And, then I'll be a yoga teacher and a coach. And I think most people would say that when they're doing those type of activities, whatever it is for them, whether it's artistic or something else, that they're in, a flow state, right? And where you're not almost like a meditative state, right? Or you're not thinking about things. It's just,
it's a state of
you're almost channeling. And and so I do think it's super important. And one thing I work with clients of because often we're kind of told what those things should be, what we should be doing, what type of exercise we should be doing, what type of activities. And we don't even allow ourselves to ask or imagine what are the things that that bring me joy? What would I be doing if I didn't try to put it within the framework of what is acceptable
And if you try to put it in the framework of what is acceptable, you may not do it, because it's not that it be something necessarily that's illegal or whatever, but it's still something that's for you. It's for you individually, not for them. We end up being pleasers and wanting to make everyone happy.
Yeah. And that goes back to the boundaries piece, and I realized even just in the last few years, I realized about myself that I would sometimes say, being a people pleaser, I would say yes to things literally before I even paused to see if that was my real answer. And parts of me, might even have a physical reaction that's saying no. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
When I've read your bio and your resume, it's you've got a lot of same shamanic traits, and sounds like a lot of the practices, both hands-on and via distance, are shamanic, with the connection to the earth, the understanding of the quantum field and the vibrations and frequencies, and using those in a positive way for betterment. Those are shamanic things you're doing. Did you?
Part of that has come from, I have the friend that I mentioned who's a shaman who I've worked with over the years, and I even have done a couple of trainings or workshops with her. And I also, similarly to you, will record and send a recap of the experience to people. And I asked my friend once, because, there's not necessarily a lot, but definitely sometimes things come up about appropriation, right? With integrating things from shamanism or from yogic traditions or different places, because I do find myself integrating a lot of different things, some of which I have really specific training in, and some of which are more intuitive. Yes. Yeah. And she said, I don't, when she talks to her guides, both in the unseen and, seen, that they would say, it's not ours to give permission to people to, use or not use. It's not we're hiding these things away. So, and people resonate with different things. So I think it's really valuable to give clients different tools and also just follow. Like I was saying before, I don't always know where things are going to go in a session, or what's going to come out of my mouth, or even what kind of weird sounds I might make, or I don't know. So,
it just kind of comes.
Yeah.
And it's very important what you just said, the way things resonate with people, because some are way ahead, some are way behind, to be able to come across to people wherever they may be, because it may be you're using a singing bowl, and it's whatever frequency that you're using of that bowl that causes someone to open up a little.
Right.
But before we go, if you have other things that you want to say, like where you are and your practice and how people can reach you. And
Yeah. Well, to that piece, in terms of where I am physically most of the time, I'm in Asheville, North Carolina, in the mountains. And I do have an office space where I can see people in person, but like you, I can see people anywhere, and I've done sessions with people in comas and all over the country. And so distance is not a barrier.
Yeah. Can I ask you about that?
Yeah, no problem.
How do you explain that? Because people, I get asked a lot. So how do you explain to people how you do a distance session? Because it doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people. So how do you explain it?
Yeah, well, that is a tough one, because it does require a certain amount of faith in the unseen and the unknown. And oftentimes, if I feel especially it's someone who doesn't have a intuitive understanding with working in the quantum field or that sort of thing, because I'm like you, I'm not a scientist. I can't explain it really in the scientific way, but I'll say, well, have you ever had an experience with prayer because most people have, or a lot of people have, where you either praying for someone else or someone praying for you, where you really were able to feel that, or where, and you named this earlier or in one of your previous podcasts, where like you're thinking about someone and they call, or you pick up the phone literally before it even rings and it's that person. A synchronicity, something that you can't explain, but you have a very distinct knowing that you are connected to that person, or something that you have thought has affected them, far away. And so most people can grab to that little, it's kind of like what I was saying earlier about the, 1 minute experience in the yoga class, that if someone can grab to like, oh yeah, I had one tiny experience like that, I can be at least somewhat open to the possibility of these larger things happening. Sometimes people have to experience it for themselves. But it's a hard thing to explain. Like to say like, oh, I had a session with this person who was in a coma and the names of their nurses came through and all this other information that human me had no way to know. But that goes back to that piece that we were talking about before about just getting out of the way and trusting what's coming through.
Being a vessel.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate the people that want to understand it from a scientific standpoint. And I like that there is more information coming through, like with, is it Lynn McTaggart, where she does these big scientific, because she's a scientist, experiments on like getting a certain number of people to meditate on like making it rain in the Sahara, or, whatever the event is, and being able to track these things scientifically, or seeing it in water crystals and, things like that. So yeah, I'm glad there is science to support it.
It's getting better, but it's still unfortunately a field that we're in that's kind of looked at as pseudoscience, but explaining that's difficult. So thanks for sharing that, because you actually gave me some insights on how to share a little bit better.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And I do think, kind of going back to that piece about things speeding up and becoming more intense, at least I'm finding that because like the squeeze is more intense, I think for a lot of people, I think people are a little more open maybe than they used to be. And more people are having their own experiences that they don't have a way to explain. And so when somebody gives them a window for that, it's sort of like the light bulb going off of like, oh, okay, I have had some experiences like that. I just didn't know what to call it or what it was. So I think that's encouraging. I find that, I'm just finding that people who I wouldn't have thought would be open to certain things, I'm having to like check my own judgment more often, about that for lots of different reasons. But, and being really pleasantly and encouragingly surprised.
Sometimes the ones you would least expect to be open are the ones that are most open.
Yes. Yeah, truly. Yeah.
But we've ventured way off. So you're in Asheville.
Yeah, like you said, I know we could probably talk for easily another 2 hours. But yeah, so I'm in Asheville, the mountains of North Carolina. So I'm in the process of changing, I was touching on that before, of changing some wording on things. But currently my website is Nourish Center Asheville, nourishcenterasheville.com.
Okay.
And people can book through there. They could also find me on Be Well Black Mountain's website. That's where my office space is. Black Mountain's a little town just outside of Asheville. It's really where a lot of my community is, Black Mountain. It's very, very close by. And yeah, and like we talked about a couple different times, distance sessions, location is not an obstacle, maybe even a benefit.
And you're in a great place up in Asheville, the mountains and the nature. You're in a great place.
Yeah, I'm really fortunate. Like we're surrounded by so much beauty and nature that's within really close distance and proximity, and also surrounded by so many other healers and healing centers and
Sedona of the East.
Yeah. 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 So come see me in Asheville or reach out from wherever you are in the world.
Yeah.
We'd love to connect with folks.
So right now it's nourishcenterasheville.com.
Yeah.
So everyone, please go to the website, check that out. And the other was Be Well Black Mountains.
Be Well Black Mountain. Yeah.
Black Mountain.
Singular.
And I want to thank you for being a guest.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I I feel the same way about, what you're putting out there with your book and the things that I've heard on your podcast so far that you're sharing about your journey too. It's really important right now.
Well, thank you.
There's so many people going through this that don't understand, that are just overwhelmed with what's happening internally and externally.
Appreciate you saying that. And I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah. It's been great. I'll look forward to next time.
Okay. Thanks, Valerie. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and we'll be back in the near future. See you then. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Everyday Shaman. Please join me each week as we will explore new topics that I hope will inspire, educate, astound, and possibly confound listeners. If you have topic suggestions, if anything in this episode resonated with you, or you care to be a guest, I'd love to hear from you. You can contact me through my website, www.everydayshaman.net, or email me at jeffreybrunk@everydayshaman.net. You can also find my personal memoir, The Everyday Shaman, One Man's Journey into the Miraculous, on my website and on Amazon.com.